Helen Heed, founder of STREAM. STREAM stands for Scar Tissue Remediation, Education, and Management. And I believe that scar tissue, whether it's physical, emotional, or existential, needs to be acknowledged as the cause of too much human suffering. So I developed STREAM as an advanced professional training for healthcare practitioners. Do we break down barriers and cross out of our lanes to get the job done? Yes, we do. But STREAM gives health providers of all stripes the tools they need to address scars effectively and amplify human potential as a result. I'm so proud of the work that STREAM graduates are doing that I made a video series to highlight their accomplishments. In this clip, I interview my friend and STREAM collaborator, Rachel Fell. Rachel and I met while she was in the throes of a massive positive disintegration, and our friendship grew into a close co-creative effort that radically changed the course of STREAM as we worked intentionally and intensively to add deep intrapersonal work to the STREAM program. This clip is called Crossing the Cartesian Divide, and in it, Rachel and I examine the mind-body split in Western culture and personal experience through multiple lenses of religion, gender, trauma, and neurodivergence. We talk about our experience getting neurodivergent assessments, noting the impact of outdated styles of assessment that leave the body out of the equation of what it means to be a whole person. Rachel speaks to the importance of making meaning for herself on her own terms and the impact of making her own meaning, including her body in the mix. Rachel recalls the moment when she realized that she could self-locate immediately and at will. This is complex stuff, but affects so many of us these days as we get pulled ever more deeply into the lure of our devices and we forget to take proper care of our nervous systems. Enjoy. So where this brings us to is, you at this time, you got assessed, you got your first sort of like labeling as you knew you were gifted, yes, but the autistic word may not have been something you had thought about in reference to yourself.
I had forgotten I was gifted. So they put me in the, it was like kindergarten and hyperlexic, and like you get put into the gifted and talented class. And I always felt like the weird kid out too, and so, yeah, like I had actually entirely repressed that too. Like, it's like that just goes
So was
away.
it news to you then when you received an assessment label as profoundly gifted and autistic?
Yes. And it was, for a little bit of time, I think it provided some interesting and helpful scaffolding in terms of like who I am, or like why do I feel so different? Why do I feel this disconnect? But without being able to kind of like zoom out, integrate, bring the body along, understand the nervous system, be encouraged to make meaning for that for myself. It's like, what does profoundly gifted actually mean?
Well,
And
that's a very
yeah.
interesting question, because where is wholeness in a label of profoundly gifted that doesn't include the body?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And I would say that like what we're really talking about too is this, like, in a neurodiversity affirming paradigm, all humans are the same, different, and distinct. And just for me, as the primacy of the sub and unconscious, the primacy of the body, the primacy of the subjective experience is an existential reality. Like, we are co-creating reality. And so to be encouraged by somebody to help make meaning and put these dots together.
Yep.
So, I'm on my living room floor here, like, I'm in physics and I'm in physiology, and I'm like voraciously learning and giving myself permission to restructure reality for myself, essentially, to make meaning of this for myself, to not look to the outside world to tell me what this means, but to actually go in my body, my subjective experience, full body intelligence. It's like, all right, Rachel, like, how are you going to contextualize and work with these differences?
Well, you have to, because nobody else can provide. Everyone has to come into the fullness of themselves on their own. If we let other people define us for us, then what we get is a limited life because it's limited by their limitations.
Yeah.
And what if those limitations don't really apply to someone who's profoundly gifted or somebody who's autistic? Because hyperfocus has its benefits.
Yes, it sure does. I'm looking at Queen of hyper focus.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also just like physiologically inaccurate. Like truth is the seat of perception, the seat of experience is in the subjective body individual experience. And so if we don't include that,
We have to include what I like to call the immediacy of felt experience. The
yes,
immediacy of felt experience means we can trust our body to give us accurate information. However, if your body's been giving you a lot of very intense symptomology that nobody can explain, how easy is it then to turn around and trust one's body? So this
right.
is sort of where we met. We were at this kind of crux between, what do I do here? My body's giving me crazy symptoms. I've got this assessment here, profoundly gifted and autistic. Where do I land to find meaning here in this ever shifting field of potential? And so we started our conversations around this time in your experience, right? You and
Yeah.
I met, and, and I said, have you tried a coffee enema? I think it's your liver.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's, it's so interesting. Like when we go back, time travel back to this, I remember exactly where I was standing at my kitchen island when, like, the way you spoke about the body as the sub and unconscious landing. And I remember having a profound nervous system shift in that moment. So, like, strangely, this repairing the Cartesian divide representationally, conceptually, was the like frame that allowed me then to experiment with and actually feel and have experiences of like, oh, you're going to do a gallbladder cleanse, Rachel? Yeah, like you're seeing you're seeing God. You're also like, having this like profound cleansing experience, right? So like for me personally, because I was so representational and so out of my body and so intellectually existentially focused, to meet somebody else who could speak to me in that way, who could help me understand from and meet me where I was the basis of that was the crack that allowed the light to get in, then to drop progressively into and explore and play with these embodied experiences and embodied interventions.
And I
Yeah.
think there was a whole kind of lack of acceptance of having a body because of early conditioning. Then there has to be a going back and scooping up and including of the body
Yeah.
after so much body, I would say, deliberate body ignoring in many
Yeah.
ways.
Yes. And so just like self bypass gets in through many vectors of cultural influence and trauma and conditioning and messaging and like ways of being, I think so too does the Cartesian divide, this I think, therefore I am thing. And that got in many different ways: religion, gender, trauma, neurodivergence. And I'm going to innate neurodivergence, plus giftedness and being autistic. You're taking in a lot of information. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of mismatch with like being in the physical world with other people. I see this with my clients all of the time. It's like they so identify with the intensity and complexity of that inner experience, and that Cartesian divide, it's like the body just slows them down. It's sort of like without that reframe of the body as living sentient sub and unconscious, it's like my connective tissue, my fascia, is storing all of this information literally.
Society at large in the conditioning ocean that we're navigating constantly. So
Yeah.
making meaning between all these layers, the layer of what's going on in my body, the layer of, or the doorway of emotionality, like how come I get triggered by this one thing every single time and I can't control it? Well, we could look at that. We can look at it through the role of its meaning to us. And then, now we're in the world of the existential meaning making. Then beyond that is politics and education and religion and all of the things, the shoulds, coulds, the woulds, if we were perfect in any one of these institutionalized boxes,
Right.
where people are asked to conform and make their bodies sort of conform to the size, shape, and limitations of the box. Well, you're at the cutting edge of, let's say, extracorporeal scar tissue. How's that for a
Yeah.
fancy ass word?
And yeah, like, seeing people shift in, a handful of sessions, it's amazing. It's beautiful. It's rewarding. Like what happens when we can sufficiently undo that existential scar tissue of the Cartesian divide.
Exactly. Well, what happens when you when you make the journey across the bridge, that bridge is the Cartesian divide, suddenly we come back together. We're stronger, we're more whole, and often have more agency in the regulation of our nervous system, because we realize that the vagus nerve is the thread that we're following across the Cartesian divide,
Yes.
80 up, 20 down. And when we start to be able to have that awareness, conversation, and follow the vagal breadcrumbs in both directions, then we realize that it is, there's a much larger conversation to be had here about the neuroendocrine reality that the vagus nerve underpins. And we start to have agency within our own neuroception.
This is another example of like a dropped Cartesian divide. So the demand for people to be able to name their emotions, or when we talk about emotional intelligence, we assume verbal facility, and there's a whole space that's much deeper than that people aren't talking about exploring. And that, I think Stream gave me the structure and tools to take my work in a much deeper direction than I ever